Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Casual Sports Podcast, Monday edition. It's a new week, start of October, September, coming to a close with some great football on Friday. We're excited to talk about it here on the show. As always, it's myself, Al Caberna, no Matt Morrison. Allergies getting the best of them here as our temperatures. Also, pretty freezing cold. It was a pre-record in the morning, got my windows open, and it's still 40 degrees, so bear with me if I ever look a little cold on the show. It's freezing today. I think we had frost advisories overnight. So, as we move forward into the rest of this week, hope everybody stays warm. Friday night football from here on out looks like it is going to be chilly. So make sure you're bundled up every game. And if it's too cold for you to go to the game, you know where you can find it? That's right, your sports network. So without any further ado, let's talk about some of these games from this past week. You can see on the bottom all the games that went on. And if you missed any scores and you don't hear them on the show today or tomorrow, go on to YSNlive.com. A new scoreboard tab tells you every single score that we have on the network every night. So go back September 30th. That's when Friday Night Football was. And you can see every score from across the valley. Great job by Quinn Puskar and Brian Scott. Amazing from them to put that together, and it worked like a charm. I loved it calling my game on Friday night, kept checking in, running down every score. It's like, man, this is great. You can't get this kind of coverage anywhere else. So let's talk about those games that had some amazing coverage this past week on Your Sports Network. The first one, a really, really awesome game. Ursuline taking on St. Vincent St. Mary, the Battle of the Irish. Obviously, everybody here on the network wanted Ursuline to pull out the victory. They don't quite get it done. They dropped this 28-35. Had the lead early on, 7-0 in the first quarter. Got tied up at halftime at 14 apiece. Ursuline, consistent, you can say that for sure. 7 points in every single quarter. Exactly 7 points in every quarter. So, I mean, that's one thing right there. I mean, utmost consistency. You have to be impressed with that. But defensively, letting up that fourth quarter, 2 touchdowns and a 2-point conversion as well really kind of hurt because Ursuline, they just couldn't get the big plays consistently against this Irish defense. So it's kind of what you expected, a close game. And ultimately, St. Vincent St. Mary's just came out with the win. I mean, 2 great programs. St. V had only lost once on the season. They lost to Glenville, who I warned you was a really, really good team. And, in Division II, they sit 11th overall. In Division III, Ursuline's 3rd. I mean, this was about as close as you can get in terms of matchups. 41 in the state versus 35 in the state. And those 6 spots gave St. V a little bit of an edge. So it was a really great game for this Irish squad. And, you look forward to the rest of their schedule. And likelihood is they're going to do pretty well on their own. They got St. Joseph next week, or this coming Friday, I should say, which is going to be a tough matchup. It's on the road. After that, though, you come back home, Steel Valley Conference play. Youngstown East, they should roll over. And then Cardinal Mooney. Mooney might catch them for a half, but I think Ursuline much better of a team. and they're going to be able to pull away in that game. And, you really just kind of have to continue to look around at this Ursuline squad and be impressed that after going on a run last year, obviously into the postseason and into state championships, and they graduate so much talent, including their star quarterback, and they're still coming out with a great new team. Obviously, some players from last year, but they had to replace a lot, including a starting quarterback, which at this level is almost impossible to an extent sometimes. So for them to come out here, replace a quarterback with DC Farrell, and for him to continue to play at this level and take what he did at Liberty a season ago and continue to play the style of football he did at Liberty and even taking a step forward here in Ursuline, it really goes to show you the level of coaching that Ursuline is at and really where that program is at as a whole. And I really think at this point, the only thing that's going to stop them come postseason might very well be themselves. Playing competitive football like this against teams that are division higher than you, their 2 losses are to Division II teams that are at the top of the standings. What more can you ask for from this Ursuline squad? They beat everybody else in front of them. They beat one of the top teams in PA and Farrell. They were in 1-score games against 2 Division II leaders in St. V and Fitch. Ursuline has put together a phenomenal season at this point. Postseason, everybody else better be scared to play this team because they are going to be really, really good. Likelihood is we're going to see another big run come out of this team. We haven't seen the playoff polls dropped yet this week for we'll see that. Let me check here when those will come out. I think they should come out Tuesday. That's been the annual release so far, at least in the month of September. That's what it was. So we should see that come out here tomorrow on the show. We'll be talking about that, of course, as we break down more games. But I imagine Ursuline, they're still going to be sitting pretty high up in their respective regions. So congratulations. They lost, but congratulations. What's been a great season. What I think we all kind of expect to be a really good postseason as well. So we'll see how that plays out. Next game, though, a team that bounces off a hard-fought loss to Massillon, Washington, and they come out strong, beating Strongsville 35-3. It's Austintown Fitch. Again, playing great football, and this is kind of the level we continue to expect out of Fitch. I think they had some struggles early on. I know while I was trying to call my game and look over here at this game, I think I saw early on. I mean, it was a close game in that first quarter, but ultimately the better team ended up pulling out the victory in Fitch. And once they get going, they're almost impossible to stop. They're going to have a hard road game this Friday out there in the Suburban League Conference against Wadsworth, a 5-2 team that is going to test your ground and pound defense, because that's my conference over there in West Akron. I know this league. I know this team. They played my high school a lot. They're going to give Fitch everything they can handle and then some. Really great team they're going to be going up against. Fitch has what it takes to take him down. I know that for certain, because this Fitch team, what more could you ask for from their schedule? The fact that they have gone through 7 games of the hardest football out there in the state, and they're a 6-1 team, I think goes to show you how good this team is. And the likelihood is they're going to finish this regular season 9-1, take a top seed into the postseason, and then I guess we'll see from there. They are extremely talented, and I think at this point we have no reason to doubt what Fitch is going to give us. Sure, they lost 49-28 to probably the number 2 team in the state, Massillon, Washington. Okay. Came back out the next week, won 35-3, and they're ranked top 15 in the state. Top 5 in Division II. Number 1 team rated in Youngstown off Max Preps. Fitch is in a perfect spot, and we always talk, especially college football, and even here in the show recently, control your destiny, man. Control where you're going to end up at the end of this season, because at the moment, they're cruising in the right direction. And so long as they continue to play Fitch football and don't try and change their style for anybody else, make your opponent adjust to you, they're going to be just fine. They're going to make a deep playoff run, and the Falcon fan base is going to be screaming for a while this season, probably deep into November, if I had to guess. Our next game, Beaver local. The Beavers, now winners of 5 straight games. And not only have they won 5 straight, they're looking really good. Really good. They come off a 62-0 win a week ago against Oak Glen, and now they come in, wipe the floor with Harrison Central 65-7. Beaver Local started 0-2. Now winners of 5 straight, and the likelihood is they might finish this season without another loss. If they continue to play like this, 65-7. Harrison Central's not a bad team, guys. Harrison Central came in at 4-3. They have wins over East Liverpool, Perry Traditional out of Pittsburgh, Buckeye Trail, Claymont. Sure, they weren't great, but nobody is going to expect 65-7. That is absolute domination. Beaver Local has completely flipped the script around on this conference. And you look at what they've done in conference play. 185 points scored. 7 points up. They have allowed 1 touchdown in the conference. 1. Show me any other team playing like that. That is an insane turnaround. In total, 305 points for. 112 points allowed. They allowed 105 points out of conference. A 7 inside of conference play. 7 points was this game. They had 2 shutouts against East Liverpool and Oak Glen before this, in which they won 58-0, 62-0. Now they win 65-0. Indian Creek this week, they better watch out, because this is insane football we're seeing right now from Beaver Local. Absolutely incredible football. And Indian Creek is 1-6. They don't stand a chance. Beaver's playing way too good of football right now. John Hay in week 9 for Beaver Local, 5-1. That's going to be the real test of what this team is going to be. What this team is going to be in the postseason comes down to their final 2 games against John Hay, who's 5-1, and Wheeling Central Catholic, who's currently 5-0. But, I mean, if they keep playing like this, conference play, they're averaging over 60 points a game. You ain't touching that. This conference is theirs so long as they hold on, because that is incredible. Incredible performance from Beaver in that game. Brookfield, they also had a pretty good game. They took down Newton Falls 34-0. I was on the call for this one. We were pretty much doing filler, because the first half it was 34-0. We went to a running clock, and Newton Falls couldn't really push anywhere. Brookfield played a really outstanding game. The one thing that stood in their way the entire time, and I mean it, the entire time, was themselves. Their first play from scrimmage of the day on the offensive side of the football was an 81-yard rushing touchdown from Christian Davis that got pulled back on a holding call. Then they get about a 15, 20-yard pickup. Then it's a 50-yard touchdown. Gets called back on holding again. In the first quarter, I think it was, they had 4 penalties that in total took away 132 yards and 2 touchdowns. Newton Falls should consider themselves lucky in this game that Brookfield stood in their own way. This was the most undisciplined Brookfield has been all season, but it was still better than what they did a year ago. A year ago in this game, they had 15 penalties for 150 yards about. This season alone, they've now had about 35 penalties on the entire season. Last year, they were right around 100 penalties on the season. Now we're over halfway, and they're well under 50. This has been a huge improvement for Brookfield football, a big turnaround that they needed, and it's still going to continue to test the discipline of this team for the rest of the season. But with LeBron on the schedule next week, a chance to clear this week, I should say. I don't know why I keep doing that. With LeBron on the schedule this week, a chance to clean things up. But then on the road, Garfield. And you cannot be undisciplined going up against Garfield because they are going to eat you alive. If you allow Garfield any hole, any opportunity, they're going to destroy you. And, talking to Randy Clark before this game down on the field, the focus was on that Garfield team to an extent. He obviously said, I just want to win a football game here today, and then we'll worry. But when I was talking to him about that Garfield game and what's coming up, he has to tear apart the entire defense. He told me we had to change the entire defensive scheme to go and counter that wing T style football that Garfield plays. So this week against LeBron, expect Brookfield to look completely different. It's going to be a completely different defensive scheme. Normally they're running a 3-man front with 5 linebackers surrounding it. They're basically putting 5 guys on the line. Their focus is rushing the passer and stopping the run. And really, they do outstanding at that. Cameron Brainerd got a couple of big hitters, but every time they got a big hitter, maybe 1, 2, 3 in a row, it was only going for 10, 12 yards. Brainerd wasn't breaking off 25, 30-yard runs. It was 12, 15 yards. They got a first down. They grab another one, and then Brookfield's defense would pull up a stop. And you're going to give up runs like that to great running backs like Cameron Brainerd and Carter Rapsick. Both great runners, and they're going to get those kind of carries. They're going to have those big runs. You can only hold them down so long. But the thing that impressed me most was their ability not to stay down, because in years past, Matt Morrison and myself have called this team. Now this is the third season we've covered them. In years past, when plays like that happen, when momentum shots happen for the other team, Brookfield's defense has kind of gone, all right, well, they won this drive. We'll give them a touchdown. They let off. They go, all right, man, we're down. Yeah, we're not taking this one. They got the momentum. Fine, let them take it. This year, this defense, it's a whole new mentality. It is, hey, yeah, they got one play. Let's go win the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Every play is a new game for them. And when you have that kind of mentality, especially as a defense, sure, we just gave up a great play. Let's go make a great play on the other side. When you have that kind of mentality as a defense, it makes you dangerous. And that's what Brookfield's defense is. You look now on the season, they still haven't allowed more than 2 touchdowns in a game. This was their first shutout, but they've had 3 games that they've allowed, before this, that they've allowed only 1 point. A field goal to Reserve, 6 points to Liberty, 6 points to Crestview. And no points here today. And likelihood is they're going to keep that up against LeBron next week. Later this week. I don't think LeBron is going to get more than a touchdown if they get a touchdown in this game. If Newton Falls couldn't score, I don't know if LeBron is going to. Crestview and Liberty and Western Reserve have some decent offenses that can move the football. So did Newton Falls. Newton Falls might have been the best offense out of all of those. Brookfield's shown improvement. And the fact that Brookfield continues to improve with a senior roster makes them dangerous for the rest of the season. And I'd go out on a limb to say if they continue to play like this with that dangerous mindset and that fresh mindset every play, I think you really have to look at them as the favorite to win the conference. And I really like Garfield this season. I think Garfield probably the team to beat in this conference especially. But if Brookfield can continue to play with this mentality, and look at what they're doing offensively. This was their second lowest scoring game of the year. Third lowest, pardon me. But one of those was the Ursuline, which I think at this point in the year, we've kind of all blocked out of our memories. If you're talking Brookfield football, no one wants to go back to that Ursuline game except for Randy Clark, because he wants to go and analyze that 1,000 times. And one of the big things, that he emphasized, especially with that game, he didn't know how much he needed fixed until they played that game. And I think that loss at the beginning of the year has made Brookfield 10 times the football team they were coming into the season, because they found everything wrong and they've been able to fix it. And you've seen it the last few weeks. They're playing perfect football. As perfect as you can get. And going into week 9 against Garfield, even if they lose this game, a team that they have had struggles the last few years, even if they lose that game, an experienced coach like Randy Clark is going to go in and he's going to fix things. Brookfield has never beaten Garfield. Granted, they've only played twice. The first game they played against each other was the very first game Matt and I called. September 11, 2020, Garfield rolled 46-7. A year ago, it was 31-17 in Garfield. Now they're back in Brookfield. Now they're back on the road. Who knows what this story is going to tell this season? I think it's going to be very interesting. I think you got a chance for a Brookfield upset. If Randy Clark can go in here and turn this defense into something else, or even just make some minor improvements to this defense, and they can get healthy, really the big loss is no Colin Murphy the rest of the year. Blew out his knee. He's not playing. He lost that. I think it was the Western Reserve game. But their defense has been fine without him, and that's the scary thing. They lost maybe their hardest hitter on the defensive side, outside of Connor Hayter, who's going to Navy, and they're still this good. Yeah, Garfield better be game planning for them too. On the side of Newton Falls, they went good against LeBray a week ago, 27-0. But like I said, they made good plays on the offense. They had big hitters from Rapsick and Brainerd. But their severe lack of passing game in this one hurt them. They didn't have a single pass completion. I believe they were 0 for 9. Even down 3 scores, they couldn't move the ball through the air. And that was the big problem for them. They couldn't make Brookfield's defense honest. They couldn't pull them off the line of scrimmage. And every time Pennington had to drop back to throw the football, he was under constant duress. Now, as they move forward on the season, it's a good final 3 games that they can get back to 500 at, if they can get Pennington to move the football, because they couldn't even complete a pass. And it wasn't that Pennington had bad throws. Neither did Keegan Murray. They used him in the game as well. They had Carter Rapsick take snaps. They had 3 different quarterbacks playing this game. They have Liberty, Campbell, and Crestview for the final 3 games of the year. I can see wins against Campbell and Crestview. What we just saw out of Liberty the last 2 weeks, I'm not so sure. We'll talk Liberty here in a second, but Liberty won. They won a tight game against Champion. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. But that could be a trap this weekend for Newton Falls to fall into. You don't look at as Liberty as much, but they played Campbell and they figured some things out. They figured out how to move the ball, and they have confidence. And when you talk confident football teams, there's nothing more dangerous. And coming off a game like this, I hope there's some confidence for this Newton Falls team. I hope they got something in the tank to turn it around. And when you look at this on the side of Brookfield one final time when it comes to that Garfield game, Garfield beat Newton Falls 40-7. Brookfield won this game by 1 point more and didn't allow a touchdown. 34-point differential versus a 33-point differential. That's going to be a fun game in week 9. I can assure you. Cardinal Mooney. They picked up a big win and a much-needed win. That makes it now 3 straight. Granted, the competition hasn't been there, and they have some hard, stiff competition coming up the next few weeks. A 38-7 victory here, much-needed over Brush. They took down the Arcs, who now fall to 2-5. Really not all that great of a team. But, you got to give credit to Cardinal Mooney. They played good football, solid football. They didn't allow much on the defensive side. Their offense, really, an offense we've seen absent through the first 4 games of the season. The last 3 games, they've completely turned around. They were averaging about 35 points a game. And I know the competition's not there. Lutheran East, Youngstown East, and Brush are not good teams. But it's confidence. And I was just talking, a confident football team is a dangerous football team. And you look at what they have coming up. They're going on the road against Warren G. Harding, a team that just took down Boardman. It makes it interesting because Mooney now has an offense, but they're going to go up against a very tough Warren G. Harding team. In that game, despite the records being opposite, probably still a game you have to watch out for, especially with Harding getting to play this at home. A big stadium. I'm expecting a decent-sized crowd coming off a win and potentially a postseason push for them. Mooney's going to have it rough down there. I'm interested to see which way that goes. Then they have Steubenville and Ursuline. Sorry, Mooney fans, you're not taking their Holy War this year unless you absolutely turn it up for the last half of the season, because they could finish 7-3. But that means winning against Warren G. Harding, winning against 6-1 Steubenville, who just lost to Lindsley, by the way, by a single point. The same Lindsley that beat Mooney 28-14. Lindsley beat Steubenville 28-27. And then Ursuline in the final week. Mooney's got work cut out. I'm interested to see what they do. Garfield turned on the Jets, dog. 6-1 their record after a 56-14 win over Campbell. They're playing really good football, and unfortunately, Campbell was the recipient of it this week. Pardon me. Campbell was the recipient of it this week, but 56-14, there's not much you're going to do to stop this offense. And, I think a lot of us here have said, man, Garfield looks like a better team than they did a year ago. One interesting thing I heard was Randy Clark saying he thinks last year's Garfield team was better. And that's a coach that has done a lot of scouting on this specific team. And I know we tend to love the word of coaches in this one. I'm interested to see what that matchup's going to become because it has been a tune-up week for Garfield. They have Crestview, which is going to be another tune-up game. And then week 9, Brookfield-Garfield, that's going to be the matchup. That might be game of the week. It's game of the week in the conference. It's the conference championship that week. It gets decided right there because both these teams are undefeated in conference play. In Garfield, they're rolling the conference at the moment. 3 straight wins. LeBray 34-0. Newton Falls 40-7. Champion 54-14. And now Campbell 56-14. I know he said that this team was better last year. It's hard to see that at this point in the season with how they played. Garfield won 56-6 a year ago against Campbell. A Campbell team that I actually think was probably better last season. I saw them a couple times last season. They only went 1-9, sure. And their only win, again, was against East Palestine. But from what I saw last year, they were a better team a year ago. And you look at their season to finish out, might have a chance to beat LeBray in week 10. If they play a good football game, they can beat Newton Falls in week 9, but they're not going to win next week against champion. Not in my eyes, at least. But Garfield, Brookfield, MVAC championship, baby. That's what it's all about. Cardinal won 34-13 over Grand Valley. Not really much to go over in this game. Grand Valley, they're having a down season. Cardinals, an average football team, and they took it out on a lesser opponent in this game. A team that just wasn't on their level. Not a bad game. 31-point margin. It's fine. You'll look at both these teams to finish out the year. Cardinals got Crestwood, Cuyahoga Heights, and Berkshire. Not favorable for them. Probably don't see a playoff in that future. In Grand Valley, unfortunately, they might not be seeing one either. Now 1-6. They're likely going to drop the Roots Town this week, 1-7. Then you got Crestwood and Beechwood, the final 2 games of the season. And Crestwood, a 3-4 team. I mean, there's a chance there. In Beechwood, there's a chance as well, just 2-5. But a 7-loss team likely ain't making the playoffs. That's the unfortunate side of it for a team like Grand Valley and for Cardinal. Crestview, they do come out with a win, though, 22-7 over the Vikings after losing last week big time to Brookfield, 53-6. They bounce back here. Unfortunately, they're not going to have a chance to keep this momentum going, and that's kind of what they've seen all season, right? I mean, you look at the schedule. They started against Salem. They kept it close. And any other team, I think, coming off a game like that would have some momentum going into the next week, but then they had to take on Southern, and they kept it close again. They lose by a single possession. It was 12-7. They shut down maybe one of the best offenses in the region, but they didn't have any at that point. And then they go in the next week, they get the offense to go, but now the defense shuts down, and they lose by another single-score game. And then finally, the skies clear up, and they win a game 63-0 against Campbell. But then they don't have an opportunity to keep the momentum on because they have Brookfield coming into town the next week. And it was like they were in a hurricane and they didn't know it. They had those outer bands, those first 2 games. It was like, all right, you're fine. Then they got hit with the eye wall and United. And then they saw the eye of the hurricane. Woohoo! Clear skies. Woohoo! 63-0. And then it came right back through, and Brookfield took them down. And now maybe we'll see where they are. They got a break in the storm against LeBray here, 22-7. Garfield, they're going to get hit by another. And then they have Champion, and then they have Newton Falls. I don't know what Champion Newton Falls are going to be, but I know Garfield ain't going to be pretty. And it's not like this is a bad Crestview team. I'm not saying that. But they just haven't had any breaks this season. They haven't had a chance to go on a run like we've pretty much seen from any other team. If you handed Crestview Brookfield's schedule, yeah, they probably would have lost the Ursuline game. But I really do think you could have seen Crestview with a winning season. Because I think they definitely have beaten the last 5 opponents at this point in the year. With the way they played starting off, they would have had momentum. They likely could have taken down Springfield, Reserve, Liberty, Campbell, and obviously they couldn't have beaten themselves last week, but Newton Falls this week. With the way Crestview played early in the season, if they had been able to capture that momentum and roll at any point, this Crestview team probably would be at the top of the conference. And they're still 2-1 in conference play. That goes to show you, despite the fact that they didn't win out of conference, they've picked up 2 wins in conference play. And you look at them rest of the season, yeah, they're not going to be favored at home against Garfield. Might not be favored against Champion on the road. If that was a home game, I think I'd take Crestview. But then Newton Falls, week 10, it's a home game. If they take that Champion game, I'm taking them in Newton Falls. I think this Crestview team, one that's better than their record, but they haven't had any chance to breathe this season. They have just had a sumo wrestler sitting on their chest. And their only breath of fresh air has been against Campbell and LeBray in every other game. They didn't stand a chance. Salem 5-2, Southern undefeated, United 1 loss, Brookfield 1 loss, Garfield 1 loss. Yeah, they weren't winning that. On the side of LeBray, maybe the biggest turnaround we've seen from one program 1 year to the next. Last season, they lost once in conference play, and it was to Garfield. That was their only loss in the regular season, in fact. They made it down to Mogador in mid-November football in the postseason, 3rd round, and they went to overtime. They lose their coach. They lose a couple of star players. And now they're a shell of that team. It looks like this is a completely different program than we saw last year. And it's a shame. I was looking forward to some LeBray games this year to see what they could do. I was really interested to see how they would have matched up against Valley Christian, this new Valley Christian squad, compared to what happened last season when LeBray was awesome. And this year, we didn't see that. It was 40-12 in that game. This one, 22-7. I think the one thing you can say, their defense showing some improvement as the season goes on. Score totals against them, they're going down a little bit. They'd like to see them go down a lot more. Unfortunately, pardon me here, like I said, I'm pre-recording this early in the morning. Personally, I don't know if they're going to win a game. Week 10, probably their best shot against Campbell. Brookfield and Liberty, I don't see it. Unfortunately. A team I do see a bright future for, Addison. Now 7-0. They win 49-14. Man, this team is good. How many times do we have to say this on the show? Addison is good. People pay attention to this team. Not only that, they have a beautiful field. I didn't see it until this weekend. Chris Sigler was sending a picture in the group chat, and I was like, oh my God, that might be one of the best fields at the high school level I've ever seen. It looks like if you took Appalachian State's football facilities and you dropped it into Ohio and made it a high school stadium instead of a college cathedral, it's a really nice stadium. They had a beautiful sunset there as well, and it set the tone for what was a phenomenal game, 49-14. I mean, Addison playing outstanding football. And we all knew East Liverpool wasn't going to win this game coming into it, but I was impressed they went out there and gave themselves a fighter's chance. They still scored 2 touchdowns in this game. And they had this game tied at halftime. But then halftime adjustments came around. Edison made them. The Potters just didn't have enough to keep up at that point. They did all they could. They gave themselves a shot. But at the end of the day, Edison was just the better team. And when you have a game like that, all you can hope is that your opponent keeps making mistakes and you can keep capitalizing off of them. Once Edison stopped the mistakes and stopped getting in their own way, they ran away. East Liverpool coming up. They're not going to win next week. They got Kent Central Catholic coming up here Friday. Best shot might be Oak Glen, who's a 2-4 team. The only problem, Oak Glen can't score the football pretty well. And up until last couple of weeks, they've had a really good defense. But I don't like them against Ware, the Red Riders out of Weirton, West Virginia in Week 10. Unfortunately for the Potters, I mean, it looks like it's going to be a 1-9 season for them. Postseason probably out of the question. You hate to see a team, though, drop their final 9 of the season. Obviously, I mean, they can hang their hat on the one win beginning of the year against Minerva, but you hate that kind of moral victory in a season that started out so promising. I mean, I think a lot of us saw that 44-7 win week 1 against Minerva, and we're like, all right, Potters football, here we go. We're going to see something this year. And we just haven't seen that since then. It's been a real turnaround since that game. Speaking of turnarounds, this goes both directions in this one. Girard and Poland, the Bulldogs, pull off their second straight victory after Girard drops their second straight loss of the season. They lose to South Range last week, and they had the dreaded letdown this time around against Poland. They lose it 19-21. And this is one of those things we've continued to push. Poland is a pretty darn good 3-3 football team coming into this, and now they're going to be a pretty darn good 4-3 team coming into this week. And you'll look at where they sit: Lakeview, Jefferson, Struthers. Don't look now. Poland might finish 7-3, maybe 6-4. But I think you got a good shot at either one of those. I think they can take down Lakeview. The Cortland Bulldogs, I think they can take them down. Jefferson, we've seen some holes in the armor now. They lost. Poland's giving themselves a shot here to look pretty good. Might not win the NE8. Likelihood is they're not going to. Still well behind South Range and Poland. Or pardon me. They're 4-0 in conference play. They're the first place team in conference play. My apologies. All right. Well, no, they are behind South Range. Max Preps, am I right? But, for Girard, they had the letdown. Now they have Hubbard next week. And that's not going to be an easy game for them, especially with the fall off. We've now seen no offense against South Range. Their defense fell apart. Now their offense struggles again. Defense plays all right. We've seen much better defensive performances out of them this season. And Poland capitalizes. Struthers week 9. In Struthers, ring that bell, baby. That is on upset watch. If Hubbard takes down Girard, Struthers is going to take that week 9. And then Niles week 10 for Girard. I would typically have told you Girard, but unless they bounce back this week against Hubbard, which I think they can, and they likely will, they're going to have a rough stretch in this end of the season. But Poland, they've set themselves up well. I mean, their only losses, Cheney, Canfield, South Range. Watch the power rankings when that drops this week and see where those 3 teams lie. I think it's going to paint a picture of how good Poland really is. Louisville, the Leopards, storm back into it, and they pull off the upset against Green. 27-23, they win this. They trailed 16-7 going into the half. Then they made their adjustments, held Green to 1 touchdown in the second half, and they scored 20 points. I was surprised. A good surprise at that, but surprised they pulled that off. I didn't think they had it in them. Not after what we saw the last 3 weeks. Really, the entire season they hadn't given us much to go off. And Uniontown Green, a top 10 team, and they've been playing good football. 1-score game against Glen Oak the week prior. They've beaten Ashland Jackson. They were in an overtime game against Talmadge. But they came in here on 2 straight losses and they couldn't bounce back. Crane moving forward, they're not looking good. They got Massillon, Perry, North Canton, Hoover, and Uniontown Lake coming up. That's going to be rough for them. But Louisville, they're setting themselves up in the right direction. I like it. Now 1-1 in the conference. Could potentially see something out of them. They don't have it easy coming up. It's going to be rough. Glen Oak, Notre Dame, Cathedral Latin, and Lindsley to finish the season. I don't love the schedule here for Louisville. I really don't. I don't think they set themselves up well in this year. It's a really hard slate all the way through. I don't think anyone could have guessed that every team they went up was going to have basically their best season in the last couple of years. That's kind of the unfortunate part, but they've won the games that they were supposed to. They beat Northwest and they beat Green. Kind of the games you looked at on their schedule before the year, and you're like, all right, those are probably games they can take. Especially after that week 1, 21-0, you saw good defense. Good defense can win you games down the line. That's what it's done. That's what it did here. Struthers, talking about good defense, they're playing outstanding. And I think one of the things you look at, they allowed 21 points to Girard. That's the second most points they allowed in the season. The most they allowed was 27 to Grand Valley in week 1. On the flip side, they scored 66 points. So they gave their opponent plenty of possessions to go out there and score on their own. Now they pull off the big upset that I rang the bell for here on the show. I'm glad my bell ring was successful. It's not always. But they pulled one big here, 42-14. And much like we talked about for Girard, Jefferson, defensive letdowns. And pardon me, that was Jefferson's offense. I read this backwards. Jefferson's had really good defense up to this point. Struthers, still decent defense. The only times they've allowed more than 20 was in a 21-14 overtime game to Hubbard. 42-41 loss to Streetsboro, and a 42-20 loss to Geneva. That's good defense. If it was a little better, they would have won all those games but Geneva. But their offense finally got a chance to showcase itself against the Jefferson defense that we've kind of seen take a step off last 3 weeks. It's still been really good. They're really averaging about 2 touchdowns allowed per game. Struthers is the first team to really jump on them. The most points allowed on the season by Jefferson. Coming up, I don't like their slate. South Range and Poland the next 2 weeks, then Lakeview on the road. They can win Lakeview, sure. But Poland playing the way they are, South Range playing the way they are, I don't think anyone saw a potential 6-4 season after the way they started. 3-0. Just slaughtering their opponents. Then Girard shuts down the offense. And since then, the NE8's given Jefferson troubles. I'm interested to see which way they turn. Struthers, same thing. I don't know how I feel about the finish to their schedule. Niles, Girard, Poland. Might see something here. See how much magic they got left in the hat. They win game 1. They win game 6 and 7. See what they can do in 8, 9, and 10. Next one up, Hubbard, the Eagles. They're playing good football. They got another shutout here this season. They take it 22-0 as my computer is going to freeze. Well, there we go. It's back up and running. That's wonderful. But coming off a loss, we go to Jefferson. Hubbard bounces back well. They win this 22-0. They had 3 straight weeks of hard football. And they finally kind of get that break. Then they're going to go right back to the woodshed, and we'll see how they fare against Girard. But this is the defense we saw beginning of the year that held their first 3 opponents to a combined 19 points. This is Hubbard football. And a 20-point game on their offense, kind of what we've expected this season out of them. That's pretty much what they've given us every week. Defense, this is what we expected out of them. Poland, Struthers, Jefferson gave them everything they can handle. I think their defense can play it well against Girard, and I think they can probably take it. They can probably take Niles. I don't think they're going to take South Range at the moment. Those Raiders are playing really good football, and I don't know if anyone's going to touch them here in the NE8. Liberty pulls out the close one against Champion, 35-34. very impressed with the last 2 weeks for Liberty. Going into last week, they were 0-4. They beat Campbell, and now they beat Champion for the final 2 weeks of September. Now they push forward here into October football, and they have Newton Falls and LeBray as their next two teams. After the 0-4 start, I don't think anybody would have looked at you and went, they have a chance at 4 wins this season. Nobody would have told you that after 0-4, but I think it's realistic. I don't think they have a chance against Garfield, but granted, I didn't think they had a chance against Champion, and they won. You know, I was kind of thinking that Campbell game was just kind of a fluke for them. That's what it looked like when you looked at their schedule. They had scored more than 2 touchdowns once going into that week. That was the only on the season coming into this. They had scored more than a touchdown twice. The win against Campbell and 20 points they put up against Western Reserve, and then finally they kind of get a break, 35-34. They get that offense moving, and I think a big part of this has been the switch at quarterback, and that's not a knock on Di Mattia, but this young guy they found another one, Tyson Lawrence. Kid can move the rock. In his completion percentage so far, 56% from a freshman. No touchdowns. He's got 2 interceptions. That's fine. He's a young quarterback. This is obviously a rebuilding year, and they haven't entered their stats for this game, so I don't know what his numbers were in this matchup in particular. But, you know, you've heard it all season. If Liberty could just keep the players that they've had, they would be a perennial powerhouse. And I think this is another example. There are so many star talents at this school, so many great athletes and really great kids. I mean, I call it this at this arena every week. I'm at this high school all the time. Great people, great environment, great athletes. If they could keep anyone on this football team that's really good, they would be unstoppable. They would be probably the best team in the region. They would be state champions multiple times. And they haven't seen a state championship at that school, and I think it's been 60 years, I think, is the last basketball one. I don't know what the last football one is. I know they've had some great runs in track and field. I think they had girls in states this past year. But you see, again, athletes come to the forefront. At this level, if you can have an athletic football team with athletes all around, they don't even have to be refined athletes. But if you can just put speed and power out there on the field, you're going to find success, and Liberty has tons of it. I mean, you see it in every sport. I mean, no one's touching them in track most of the time. They are so fast. And you look in basketball, especially that girls basketball team. Nobody was able to outrun them. And that was even the same in the men's side of it too. With, I think it was Jordan Davis, I think was his name. I don't remember. I've seen so many rosters since then. I know the last name was Davis. I don't remember the first name. I think it began with a J. But nobody was outrunning Liberty. And you're seeing it kind of again now in football. Now that they're finding their stride, teams are having trouble keeping up with them. And the teams that have kept up and beat them, Western Reserve, they're pretty good over there. They got some good athletes. Girard, they have great athletes. Brookfield, great athletes. Lakeview, good athletes. Champion, decent athletes. But I think you finally saw that speed now is coming together behind a young quarterback, working well. And they're finding a rhythm offensively. They're finding character. They're figuring out who they are and who they're going to be next season. This year wasn't about this year for Liberty. Really, this season mattered for the seniors. They wanted a final, goodbye season, and I'm sure they wanted to win. And Di Mattia and Lard and Hicks and Cunningham, they're going to be a little disappointed with how this season went. Sure. But I think they have to be excited that their program that they have held on to the last 4 years is turning to the right direction. I think you saw that with DC Farrell last season, a young guy. They were able to rally around. The fact that this team has been as good as they are with young quarterbacks each season, I think it really paints a picture of how good Liberty football really can be. And a game like this over Champion, I think, really goes to spell out that, hey, Liberty, if they can just keep their players these next couple of seasons, by the time this quarterback's a senior, Liberty's going to have a winning schedule. They're going to have a winning year. It's coming if they can keep their guys around. I think that's the big key. Can you keep guys in this program instead of going to Ursuline or Mooney or any other private school or higher name school that has had successful seasons? If you can get a coach here in Simon that can get these players to buy into the Leopard program, they're going to be great. It is going to be a really, really great system. Like we've seen in basketball, they bought into the Liberty way. And you're not seeing people transfer out. You're seeing these people stay. And if Simon can get this team to buy in and stick around, Liberty's going to be something here in the next couple of seasons. I got a strong feeling about that. Now, Champion, back-to-back losses. This is a game they could have and maybe should have won. But Liberty, man, they had their hearts in it. And they were confident coming off their first win of the season. They wanted another. They were hungry. Champion might not have been a little hungry. Might have taken this little for granted. They're not going to take Campbell for granted. They're not going to take Crestview for granted. It's going to be a tough games. And I think Brookfield in Week 10 is still going to be a tough game that comes down to a close one. I like Brookfield still to take that because I think they're really good and they're on par with Garfield this season, who beat Champion 54-14. But, I mean, you look at the losses on the season for Champion, Garfield, JFK, and Rootstown, you would have taken that. Yeah, I mean, any team's taken that. But then Liberty here, I think kind of the one letdown for them on this season so far, and I'm interested to see how they bounce off the letdown. What do you do against Campbell? Do you let the Red Devils stick around in this game? I hope Champion can come out kind of fresh mindset and run the table in this one and can take down Campbell this week, and they play their best football because we've seen them in tight games against teams they probably shouldn't have been this season. Newton Falls probably should not have been a one-score game. They were in a one-score game against Rootstown, 25-22. And I think you almost look back at that now. It's like, maybe they shouldn't have been in that game with what we've seen. But with wins over Southeast Ravenna, I think I'm more confused about this Champion squad than ever. I don't know if they have an identity. They have great players, don't get me wrong. Joey Fell at quarterback is awesome. He's a real super talent. And Vesey running the football. I mean, these guys combined for 310 rushing yards in the game, and they just about split it. They had 4 rushing touchdowns. But it feels at times they don't know what they want to do. And I think I kind of saw that against Newton Falls. Right out of the gate, they didn't know who they were. And Newton Falls stuck around. Same thing here. They didn't know what they were. They didn't know, especially the defense. The defense lacks an identity for me. And that's why these games have been so close. And that's why when they go up against JFK and Garfield, they're getting run over. They don't know what they are on the defense. They know they have good offense. They know it's there. But I think they need a defensive identity. And I hope it comes in these next 2 games and they can make Week 10 interesting against Brookfield. Playoffs not out of the question. 6-4 can potentially still get you in. So I think it's interesting what Champion does with the rest of this season. Lisbon and Wellsville goes the way of the Blue Devils. I was a little surprised by this. Coming off of a hard slate against Toronto, Southern Valley Christian, they get some momentum back against East Palestine last week, and then they get the win against Wellsville. And I think on the other side of it, you saw a loss of momentum from Wellsville against Southern, 64-6 the week prior. And they came in, their defense laid another egg. And Lisbon, they took that egg, cracked it over a hot skillet, and made some breakfast burritos because they were feasting in this game, 57-26. I mean, outstanding. They're going to win again this week against Leetonia. They're probably going to win Week 10 against Columbiana. Lisbon, they got a good shot at the playoffs. I don't like them against United because I think that top 3 of this conference is miles ahead of everyone else. But I really got to say, I'm impressed with Lisbon coming off of that hard slate. Everyone would have been like, yeah, coming off of that, if you just have some letdowns here, especially against a good Wellsville team. If, you had allowed East Palestine to stick around, if you allow Leetonia to stick around, if you get clobbered by United, I think people would have been like, yeah, you got beat up, bruised, battered, and demoralized in those 3 games against Toronto, Southern Valley. but they didn't. They stuck it out. And Hunter Daly was the NST Player of the Week for his performance against Wellsville, I believe. It was a great showing. Probably their best of the season, to be honest. I don't think they've played a better game. Not against a better team. And they had a 40-25 victory against 2-4 Wyndham. They had a 51-24 win against 2-5 Warren G. But now you beat a 3-4 team 57-26, your highest point total of the season. I'm taking that right now. I'm taking that, and I like it for Lisbon. On the side of Wellsville, back-to-back punches in the mouth, and it's not getting any easier. This was the easy game for Wellsville. When you looked at their schedule in this last half of the season, Southern, Lisbon, United, Valley Christian. In that 4-game stretch, this was the one to help them out, and they don't get it. And now you set up United and Valley Christian the next 2 weeks. Wellsville goes from a team we were looking at early on with that 3-2 record with 2 losses to really good teams in Toronto and Edison, to now a team that's going to struggle to make the playoffs and even struggle to find a 500 record. Because they're going to lose these next 2 weekends, and they're not going to take a winning record. They needed this game to get that 500 season, and they're not going to get it. And that's the real shameful part of it, is they had such a great season going on, but kind of like we've seen with a couple of other teams that are having down years. They might not be having down years. They're just having hard schedules, really, really tough schedules. Been the case for these next 2 teams, McDonald and Western Reserve. Reserve wins this 27-19 to pick up just their 2nd win of the year. Reserve, they've played Conneaut, Brookfield, Jackson, Milton, Waterloo, Mineral Ridge, and Liberty. Yeah, that was a hard schedule. They won game 1 against Liberty. This, their first win in quite a few weeks. 5 straight losses they got handed. This was a much-needed game. They can probably finish with 3 wins. They have Springfield, Sebring, and Lowellville coming up on the schedule. They can take Sebring. They can take their best shot and hand it back, much like they did this week against McDonald. I don't like them against Springfield or Lowellville, though. Those 2 teams are playing good football. Western Reserve, good. McDonald, they've had some tough runs. And kind of the same thing, hard schedule. They won the games they were supposed to. And that was kind of the storyline coming in was, hey, they've won games they were supposed to. They beat Columbiana, they beat Sebring. Every other game on their schedule was not winnable. This was a game, it was pretty much a coin flip. You look at the rest of their season, maybe Waterloo, maybe. But a 2-8 season, not out of the question. And that's a shame because this is a McDonald team. 2020, they were really talented. They were a really good team. They were 6-2 that year, and their loss came in the 3rd round of the playoffs against Lucas, 27-14. Since then, it's just it feels like this is just a completely different team. And obviously, yeah, it is pretty different from 3 seasons ago, pretty much. But I would have thought that they were going to be able to keep that rhythm they had going for a while. And it fell off. And that's a shame because I was really impressed when I saw McDonald in that first season and to see what they've become since. It's like, come on, what happened? But, to finish out the rest of the year, hopefully that they can try and get something, pull an upset somewhere. We've seen plenty of upsets this year in every sport. Every league of football. College, NFL. Heck, I think Canadian football had some upsets. They're in the postseason, too. If you haven't seen any Canadian football, it's interesting. Go check it out. It's very odd at times. But that's about all the time we got for here on the Casual Sports Podcast. Mike and I will continue taking things for high school football tomorrow. And without any further ado, this weekend's Beast of the Week, I'm giving this Marvin Harrison from Ohio State, the running back. Mayan Williams, the running back at Ohio State. 5 touchdowns, tied the school record for most rushing touchdowns in the game. And he dominated Rutgers. Offense didn't really want to go anywhere through the air. There was terrible winds. He's like, all right, give me the rock. I'll run it. No Henderson with him. So it was all him. But that is going to do it here for the Casual Sports Podcast. Power Hour coming up next on your sports network. I'm Alec Berna. I'll see you tomorrow.